Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about the film The Interview. The question I've gotten asked the most after people know that I've seen this film is it worth the controversy? That kind of negates the whole controversy because it was all about freedom of speech and the idea that they could make this movie and be free and release it in America. And so, like, we don't really get to pick the quality of the speech. That kind of ruins the whole freedom thing. Why even have freedom of speech if we're going to pick the quality of the speech that's going to occur? I don't think this is necessarily worth the controversy, and I wasn't planning on seeing it if this had not happened. This is a lot like when I was a teenager and I was really into movies that would get banned or there would have some controversial issue about it. I would absolutely have to see it. I would build it up in my mind, and a lot of the times you couldn't see it or they weren't very available. And I would always think because they were so controversial. And most of the time they never lived up to that hype. When you build something up and make such a big deal out of something, it's hard for it to live up to it. And certain films have lived up to it and turned out to be classics, but this film really is not one of them. It's not an awful movie, it's not a horrible movie, it's not incredibly disappointing, but I think the fact that you have people who wouldn't normally see a Seth Rogen movie seeing a Seth Rogen movie, and they aren't people who are really interested in Seth Rogen movies suddenly seeing them, and also because this isn't a really fine example of a Seth Rogen movie. This movie has a lot kind of going against it. When you think of the hype and the controversy and all that stuff, you really have to ignore all that and really think of the movie itself. James Franco plays Dave Skylark, who has a very big TV show called, I think, Skylark Tonight, and his producer, played by Seth Rogen, and him are very successful and doing really well, and then they've hit 1,000 episodes until one of their friends tells Seth Rogen that he's a total sellout and making kind of shallow, crappy, late-night TV kind of stuff. And so Seth Rogen's kind of looking to do something with more substance, and then James Franco finds out that Kim Jong-un is a huge fan of Skylark Tonight, so then they try to book him as a guest and get the interview, and they successfully do, but they have to go to North Korea to meet with Kim Jong-un and do this infamous and huge interview that no one else could get, and thus helping Seth Rogen's character be able to have some substance about what he's doing and give Skylark Tonight probably one of their biggest events in years. So they go to North Korea and meet Kim Jong-un and learn about North Korea and decide whether Kim Jong-un is running the interview or if they are. The interview kind of has a common problem that a lot of these Apatowian or the post Judd Apatow kind of comedies have. Usually they work a lot better if the idea is simple. Like, you can say it in a sentence. Like, Seth Rogen is living in a house and a frat moves in next door. Or celebrities at a party during the end of the world. That's how Seth Rogen films work the best. And he's kind of one of the best examples of the post-Apatowian style, because he's been able to see how it doesn't work with something like Green Hornet. That style's not going to really work with a more structured studio comedy. In fact, I think the only person who's been able to take that Apatowian style and merge it with more of a structured kind of studio film is Jonah Hill with the 21 and 22 Jump Street. And when you look at Seth Rogen, what he did with Green Hornet was a total mess, and this is not the mess that Green Hornet was. When you look at This Is the End of Neighbors, it's a simple premise. You can tell anybody that premise, they're going to automatically know what that film is going to be about. And all of the film reflects that premise. A majority of the film is the characters acting and reacting to that premise. And then when you look at a film like The Interview, that's not really the case. They're kind of put into North Korea. They're not really as much reacting to it as it is something that they need to prove to themselves. It's almost like the whole plot and the situation that they're put within is kind of helping them grow through it, whereas in This Is the End of Neighbors, they're put in this situation and the situation itself is making them learn those things about themselves. Whereas in The Interview, they're using the situation to do that. With the Apatow school and all these people are really influenced by it, they kind of feel like they need to have more of a plot in their films, because a lot of the films they grew up with, more of those studio comedies that Bill Murray was in, that Harold Ramis directed, that John Hughes wrote and directed, had more of a plot, had more of a structure. They're not really doing those kind of films, so it's kind of odd that they in fact want to do those kind of films. This is kind of a simple premise movie, but it's not really. You're not really describing the film if you just say it like that. And so I think that's ultimately the problem, is that what they're best at is not not what is on display here. I was watching a couple Laurel and Hardy silent shorts, and I honestly think Laurel and Hardy and a lot of great comedic voices are best when you have a simple premise and you can just do gags and jokes off of that premise and really have fun with it. They make this more of a complicated premise. With like Laurel and Hardy and all those guys, those were never the memorable shorts. Those were never the memorable movies. And with Seth Rogen and his co-director Evan Goldberg really need to understand is what they're good at. And I kind of wish they wouldn't keep trying to go back to this more structured comedy crap. I liked Neighbors and This Is the End, and those are the ones where as soon as I was trying to kind of losing faith in the style brought me back. And if those films hadn't been made, I probably would have absolutely not seen The Interview either way. And because of that, it kind of made me go, oh, well, I kind of want to see this because I liked his last two. There's been a lot of failures in this kind of idea to combine the Apatow thing with more of a structured comedy, like certainly Identity Thief. Combining that style shows the problems with comedies and studio comedies that people had before Apatow came in. So it's almost like the Apatow style of comedy wants to do the films that they ushered out, which is a bizarre kind of concept. You never think a style wants to do the kind of films that they took out in the first place and reinvented the genre. It's like almost like they want to and they can't help themselves. But I kind of wish I'd be like, stop it, do what you're good at, because those are good comedies. Those are the comedies that people keep talking about. People keep talking about This Is the End, whether The Interview came out or not. Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg are very talented comedy directors. This more displays their cons than their pros in terms of their direction and writing. I actually think Seth Rogen did a pretty good performance, more of him being deep and less funny. Maybe a better performance than something like Neighbors, but I think his performance in Neighbors was a lot funnier. The two surprise performances that aren't really advertised as much is one is Diana Bang, who plays Suk, who is Seth Rogen's love interest and is Kim Jong-un's head of intelligence. She was rather good. She's someone I've never seen before. Also, Randall Park as Kim Jong-un. I actually didn't know until right as I was researching this film before I reviewed it that he's on Veep. He has a big sitcom on ABC coming out. As soon as I realized who it was, it kind of surprised me more because you kind of don't realize the performance he's doing. Apparently he made him softer and a little sillier, and he really does a good job as Kim Jong-un. It's one of those performances where you don't realize how good he is until you see him in something else and you're like, holy crap. Watch his character in Veep and then watch him in this. I thought they were different people. He's definitely the standout of this film performance-wise. James Franco, however, I actually like him. I like that he does all sorts of different movies, but he was really off in this movie. It almost felt like everyone else was very rehearsed and stuck to the script, and that when they would cut to him, it was like improv all the time. It was just really distracting and really kind of hurt the movie. It's probably one of his worst performances. It reminded me of the time he hosted the Oscars. All of his worst comedic instincts on display in one film. And certainly him and Seth Rogen have good chemistry together, which definitely helps this film. It wouldn't work as well if they didn't have that natural chemistry together. But James Franco is just not very good in this movie. It feels incredibly shallow. It almost feels like he's playing it as a joke. Some of the time that can work in a film, but the way he did it just came out overly too silly and stupid, and I really just didn't much like it at all. We've all had an interesting experience with this movie, and that was a lot of fun, and I ended up getting to watch this with my in-laws on, I think it was like Christmas Eve or something. Now I even forget what day it was. Whenever it was on YouTube. We should all be grateful that we get to live in a time where we get to see a movie get banned and pulled from all the major theater chains, then put online, and we can all watch it with family members right before Christmas. Maybe it'll change things, maybe it won't. Who knows? But the bottom line is this movie represents the kind of things about the Apatowian kind of style that doesn't really work. I actually think of the films that try to do this and fail, this is probably one of the better ones. Not that that's saying anything. I think it's better than Green Hornet and Identity Thief and This Is 40, but those were not films I liked or ever want to watch again. It's better for the kind of failure of style and influence that it really is. Represents the kind of comedy that I don't like presently, and I really kind of wish they would work more to the strengths of this style rather than the failures. That's kind of what's holding The Interview back. They couldn't get the premise and this kind of more plotted structure that they clearly wanted with more of a looser freeform structure with Apatow to really meld together in a way that worked and sang and made a great comedy. This isn't a great comedy, it's just a movie that got involved in international politics, but really it doesn't live up to any of the controversy if that's what people are going to ask or if that's what you're wondering. And frankly, it doesn't live up to its directors, it doesn't live up to its era in studio comedy, and it doesn't really live up to much. It's a decent kind of alright studio comedy, but better version version of kind of comedy that doesn't really work, and made by people who have yet to get that kind of comedy to work the way that they always aspire it to be, when it really should be the kind of comedy that those directors are a lot better at and live in the style that they should be comfortable with, but for some reason aspire to do something that it was never fit to. Much like how this film is not really fit to live up to its controversy. So if you have seen The Interview and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to. After this film, I do kind of want to make a list of the best uses of Katy Perry's fireworks in movies and TV. I actually think Rust and Bones probably the top of that list, but this is certainly up there.